I'll begin by reading the stanzas straight through from number 23 to 24, but I may come back and go over them once again later. Number 23, Krishna is saying to Arjuna, "O son of Kunti, even the devotees of other gods, if they sacrifice to them with faith, are worshipping me alone, however improperly. For I alone am in truth the enjoyer and the Lord of all sacrifices. Those, however, who worship me in lesser aspects perceive me not in my true nature, and so they fall. Those who worship the gods go to them. Those who worship their ancestors go to the abode of ancestors. Those who worship the nature spirits go to them. But those who are my devotees come to me." Whenever anyone with a pure intention offers me a leaf, a flower, a fruit, or water, I accept his offerings as symbolic of his love. Whatever action you perform with dispassion, O Arjuna, whether eating or performing spiritual rites, or making gifts in charity, or in austerity, self-discipline, dedicate that action and offering to me. In this way, nothing you do will bind you to either good or evil karma. Firmly anchored in me by self-renunciation, you will achieve freedom and will come to me. Here again, we revisit this topic which we have discussed before in earlier chapters, but Krishna makes it very strongly in these readings that those who worship whatever it is that somebody worship, that's what we go to. Now, the implication in our previous readings, or the statement in our previous readings, is whatever we worship, we go to them upon leaving this body in death. But he doesn't mention death in this reading. He just flatly states that's what we're going to do. And so you're speaking here of worship in the larger sense of whatever it is that we worship. And all of us worship something. Now, if we think of it in the larger sense of what is worship, well, worship normally, what we consider it, is where we put our mind, where do we put our attention? What are we making mental offerings to all of the time? I don't suspect it's necessarily God, unless we take Krishna's words here and says that whatever worship you do, Krishna is in that as well. And so even if perhaps we worship at the altar of the rupee, I would suspect if it's done with devotion, maybe Krishna receives that as well. But I'm joking a little bit here. Now, the point I'm making, of course, is that wherever our attention is, that's where our heart is going to follow, that's where our consciousness is going to follow, and naturally that's what we're going to reap the results of. But speaking more specifically until worshiping, spiritual worship as we normally understand it, we do puja in the evening, we do the arati, we offer prayers, we make offerings, we go to temple, all of these types of things, we make offerings in a ritualistic fashion. And what Krishna is saying here is that, yes, these are wonderful things, but if they're not offered up to the highest, they're not proper worship. They're improper, but nevertheless, he receives them. But yet, because they're not the highest form of worship, there's a certain, it leads to ultimately a fall, and that's the reason is because there's always a little bit of ego involved in there. If there is ego in whatever we do in worship, inevitably there's going to be some karmic attachment to that. And so when that karma runs itself out, and whatever the karma might be, it's going to eventually come back to us. And so it's not the highest in the sense that it's not freeing. And so what Krishna is saying is proper worship, or the question comes up, if certain things are improper, what is proper worship? And in his commentary, Swami Kriyananda makes an interesting point. He says proper worship is that worship that offers up the little ego into infinity. you see. Because this is really the essence of the spiritual path. This is what all of us are trying to do when we meditate, when we pray, when we go to temple, when we do service, when we contemplate the scriptures, read the scriptures. What we're trying to do is we're trying to transcend the ego. And because it's the ego, that attachment to the body, the attachment to results of the fruits of our actions, that attachment is which binds us, karmically binds us, and perpetuates the round of birth and death again and again. As long as there's some ego element in there, that's going to be inevitable, because that's how this universe is made. And so the true worship is the offering up of that ego up into that infinity, to transcend that ego. Now the yogi and the yogic mystical tradition of yoga, what that really is transferring that center of awareness of where we reside. When we reside in the ego, our seat is located here in the medulla oblongata, that part of the body that controls the breath, the heartbeat, the body functions. And learning to be able to, from this seat, to transfer our sense of awareness up here to the Katashta is what we're doing in the psycho-spiritual, physical way when we meditate, when we concentrate. And this is why Lahiri Mahashaya was very strong about this, as was our Guru, Paramahansa Yogananda, is to put the attention at the Katashta and try to keep it there. As Lahiri would say, be settled in the Katashta. And if we do that, we find that then the spiritual path unfolds before us. But accepting the fact that unless a person has reached that state of development, which is rare, it's rare, but it's what we all strive toward. So accepting that fact that perhaps we are not yet at that level, nevertheless, so we do other types of worship that takes us in that direction. And that's what we want to do, is we want to go in a positive direction towards that. And so you could say all of us to some degree, as we're body bound, our worship is not purified, perfected yet, but we move in that direction. And so the point that Swami Kriyananda made, I remember there was one time that in the early days of Ananda Village, we had many different swamis and spiritual teachers and gurus from, mostly from India, but also from other countries that would come, and they were recognized, they're popular, and so Swamiji in the early years would invite them to come to our ashram at Ananda Village to give a discourse, a satsang, and many came. And I remember one day there was one fellow who came, and it was a little bit, there was some doubt as to how his advancement, and because you could tell by his personality. And somebody made a comment, and this fellow had come with disciples that he had, his chelas, you could say, and somebody afterwards was saying to Swami Kriyananda in the group of people, criticizing this fellow, finding fault in this fellow, and this person who was doing that had been a little bit vocal about that. And Swami reprimanded him. He says, don't say things like that. He says, why? There's no need. Just as Master, admonished his disciples too, don't make comparisons. And he says, he's coming, he's sincere, but yes, maybe he's not an enlightened soul, but his disciple, if you criticize, you're destroying the faith of those disciples that have pledged their allegiance to him, and they are getting something out of it, and it's their karma, and it's not for you to interject and criticize. And the larger point he was making, he said, it's a spiritual sin to diminish the faith of another person. You see this all the time, or the faith, or the aspiration, or the hopes that other people have in life. Oftentimes, a person has great hopes for something, and a person has this tendency, it's no good, and they destroy that person's hopes. And Swamiji said, no, you should never do that. Don't criticize another person's hopes or make them lose faith in their spiritual endeavor and their spiritual path. You may not agree with it, but we keep our mouth shut about that, because that person who is following that path, we don't know to what level of understanding they've come, where they've been before. And the important thing is, are they moving from where they are they moving in a positive direction? Because Paramahansa Yogananda said about the quality of hope, he said, hope, like faith. And hope is like a lantern, a light in a lantern shining in the darkness. And as long as that lantern is lit, you can see the path and you follow the path. But if the wind blows out the light, you're in the midst of darkness and you come to a stop, and it'll stay stopped. You can't advance until that light is lit again. And so if somebody is inspired in a certain direction and some good is coming to them from that, maybe you think other things are better, but if they're receiving something positive, don't disturb that person's faith. Let them move in that direction, and they'll find out for themselves. It's not our place to criticize others. And this is a common thing that you find between spiritual traditions. One criticizes this one criticizes that one. It's totally unnecessary. We should let it be. We have to understand that it takes lifetimes, really, for the devotee to perfect that devotion that is up to the level of doing what Yogananda said, or what Swami said, of offering up our ego up into the light of the spiritual eye. He says this is not something that's easily accomplished, and anybody who is attempting to do that consciously in this lifetime has probably spent lifetimes before also trying to do that. It doesn't come all of a sudden full blown. And so we have to understand that the spiritual path is a directional, progressive refinement of our love for God. And when we worship, when we externalize our love for God inwardly, that aspiration into external worship, yes, it may not be perfectly understood, but it develops by putting into action. It enhances and develops the love quality in the heart. And this is very, very important for the devotee to cultivate that devotional aspect of the heart. I know people that are very philosophical, and they say, I'm just not a devotional sort at all. Well, I somewhat disbelieve their assertion that they're not devotional, because I suspect what people are doing are narrowing down their definition of what devotion is. Devotion is being devoted to something, intensely focused on something. And if a person of intellectual bent is not intensely focused, well, then they're not practicing bhakti, and they're not practicing jnana either, because you don't have the tools of concentration. But we have to, if we're devoted to our path, whatever it might be, that in itself is the beginning of devotion, is to be intent upon it. But we then direct that intent, that intention, that concentration, that development to the qualities associated with the heart, which is embodied perhaps best by the aspect of love, reverence, the willingness to sacrifice, the willingness to serve. These must be developed in the devotee before we can progress. You could say that we're trying to uplift the life force. If you look at this from yogic terms, we're trying to uplift the life force from the base of the spine up to the point between the eyebrows. And we spoke about trying to transcend that ego. Well, it has to first pass through the heart. Unless the heart is awakened in worship and devotion, it creates a blockage, and it won't allow that to happen. It's to be able to really fully direct our attention upwards. So we must, as we feel inspiration, as we feel a desire for God, we must engage the energy from the heart as well. And then when we do that, it gains power, because we know also, looking at the heart's quality, passion is there too. Now passion can be, if it's directed outwardly through the senses, can be a hindrance, but yet that inner passion of strong wish to give ourselves, that is expressed in the lives of all the great saints. This must be there in order for us to make progress on the spiritual path. So wherever we are, we offer that worship up, and we must develop it in accordance with our own understanding and engage the heart's energy in that direction. Now, Krishna says here that I accept whatever the form of that worship is, I accept it, because I am in that already. It's not that God is over here and not there. God's in everything. And so whatever we choose, and so consequently, using an idol and offering flowers to that, or to a picture, or to whatever it might be, if we understand and we do that this is just an image or a representation or a symbol, maybe is a better way to say that. This is but a symbol of something much larger. It's not that alone. I mean, it's not that. God is not that image, but yet God is in that, and it's representative of that. And the important point of this is our sincerity. If we have sincere intention, we'll find that God receives all offerings of the heart if they're offered with sincerity. Fun story that still sticks in my mind is many, many years ago I read and I reread also the life of Ramakrishna Paramahansa from Dakshineswar temple there, where he was the priest of the temple. And he was very, of course, devoted. I mean, if you know anything of his life, and I'm sure you must know something, you know that he was a great master. And as priest of the temple, it was his duty to perform puja at different times of the day. And at one of these pujas, one of the persons that came to the puja was Rani Roshmani. Now, Rani Roshmani was the patron of the Dakshineswar temple. She made the contribution, you could say, to buy the land, to build the temple and oversee it. And she was a very obviously wealthy person and very well regarded, and also a great devotee. And so one day she comes to the puja, and Ramakrishna is doing the puja, and as he would normally often do, he would become so ecstatic. Divine Mother would come to life for him, and he would become ecstatic and lose himself to the outer world. He was doing the puja, the arati, and in the middle of it, he turns around and he goes up to Rani Rashmani and slaps her across the face. And the whole audience, of course, was aghast. Oh my God, because she was in charge. She had built the temple. She was the patron, and they, of course, Ramakrishna was recognized too as saintly, so they didn't quite know what to do. But afterwards, when people came up and said, "Oh, that was a terrible thing. What are we going to do? What should we do here?" And she said, "No, he was right. When he came up to me, my mind was wandering. I was not there. I was thinking about business or whatever it was." And and Ramakrishna picked up that thought and came. And now that was a blessing, actually, to be able to have somebody of that caliber to actually give you a slap like that justifiably. Of course, it would have to be justifiably with such a saint like he. That's a blessing. And she recognized that, and immediately she mended her ways, let's say, and she gave her full devotion. And that's how we should be too. If we're half-hearted, whether it's in our devotional expressions, half-hearted in our meditation, half-hearted in our prayers, I know this is how it is. It's hard to put 100%, but that's what is being asked of us. Because the Gita is setting before us a vision of what we want to aspire toward, and that's what we want. We want to give ourselves 100%. So Krishna says here, "Those who worship me, they come to me." But he wasn't speaking about me in the sense of me. Krishna man who, a great warrior, incarnation, avatar who lived many thousands of years ago. He wasn't speaking in that sense of form. Many people interpret him to say that, but he was speaking me in the same way that Jesus Christ spoke about me, or my Father and I are one. He wasn't speaking about Jesus Christ, this fisherman or carpenter, or he wasn't speaking about that at all. He was speaking of that higher self, the me, the infinite me, that higher expression of Krishna consciousness, those who resides in every speck of creation. So that's what Krishna was speaking to. And so the larger message here is, yes, everything, Krishna says, everything that we offer to God, Krishna, Buddhist, Buddha, Christ, or whatever your outer form of religion, whatever we offer up, God accepts if that's offered in sincerity. And whatever it is we offer, we remember that those are symbols for the offering of our little self up into the higher self. Now, why limit it comes the question here. Why limit it just to times when we do worship service, times when we go to puja, times even when we sit to meditate? In the highest sense, in the way that a true saint would look at this, everything that we do is a symbolic offering of ourself to God. And so if we can think in terms of every action we do, it's an offering. Every giving of ourself, it's in one form or another, the service, material offerings, it's just representative of something larger, something of our higher, we're offering the lower self up into the higher self. Many people, they start off going to temples and they doing worship service. What do people normally do when they go to worship of some sort? Perhaps they offer flowers, maybe fruit, they give an offering, and in the hope, God, you give something to me. I'm gonna, my son needs to pass his exams. My father is ill. My business is failing. I mean, these are, you could say, a little bit of a merchant approach. It's in consequence. I'll give you this offering. Yes, it's symbolic of myself, but God, you give me something too. And then we approach it that way. But that's, I know there's a tendency to criticize that. That's just not the way to do it. But yet, who knows where that person has come? At least they're asking. They're directing those requests to the divine, rather than simply forgetting the divine and saying, I'm going to do it all myself through my power alone. So that's positive. So don't criticize. But yet, for ourselves, why don't we think not so much of what God is going to give us, but think, what can I give? What can I give God? What can I make an offering? And if we approach our devotional worship in that way, it's a chance to outwardly express something that we're doing always inwardly, of just offering ourselves. So we bow the head even when we relax the tension here, offer it forward. Just offering ourselves to the divine. And if we can learn to do that in every action, in everything we do in life, then I think we truly express in our service and in our actions in life and in our devotion. And I truly think that we offer proper worship, because then it's an offering of the little self into that higher self. So let's take that message with us into the next week. Think in terms of everything we do. It's an offering to you, Lord. Accept my offering, my humble offering. I offer it to you with love, in no expectation. God will take care of the rest. My job in life is to make that offering. What happens next is in God's hands. Many blessings, and we'll see you again, I hope,